Good morning, everyone. I'm Lance Barron, president of the Atlanta Sisters in Crime chapter, and welcoming you to Off the Shelf, where our own Dawn Gepfer interviews authors in the effort to get them to have their books fly off the shelf into the hands of readers. We're very excited this morning to have Elizabeth Crowens, who is bi-coastal between Los Angeles and New York. For over 30 years, she's worn many hats in the entertainment industry, contributed stories to Black Belt, Black Gate, Sherlock Holmes Mystery magazines, Hell's Heart, and the Bram Stoker nominated A New York State of Fright, and she has a popular caption contest on Facebook. Her awards include the Leo B. Burstein Scholarship from the MWA New York chapter, NYFA grant to publish New York, Give Me Your Best or Your Worst, Eric Hoffer Award, Glimmer Train Awards Honorable Mention, Killer Nashville Claymore Award finalist, 2 Grand Prize and 3 First Prize Chanticleer Awards.
No, 6.
Yeah.
6 Chanticleer.
6, okay,
Awards.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
Crowens writes multi-genre alternate history and historical Hollywood mysteries, and her most recent is Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles. So you may be picking up on a slight slant here towards Sherlock Holmes. And we welcome you, Elizabeth. Glad to have you. Dawn, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Off the Shelf. I am so excited to be talking with Elizabeth Crowens. And Lance gave a great rundown of her bio, and we're just going to have to start there. Tell us about these awards, because the bio that Lance read, as you stated, it's already needs to be updated because you have more awards, the Chanticleer Awards. Tell us what's going on. That sounds amazing.
Well, the Chanticleer Awards are interesting. They and Killer Nashville's Claymore Awards actually allow you to submit a manuscript that hasn't been published yet. So I actually have many times got an award for something before it got published. And then maybe they have a lot of categories, and maybe I decided, now it's published, let's try this category. And I think, I mean, again, it's my opinion. I've never judged for them, but I would venture to say that your book probably has a better chance if it's already been published. However, that might not be the case. Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles has 2 First Prize awards. So, and I'm hoping next year it will be, because it was released in March, next year it will be eligible for Left Coast Crime, Best Humorous Mystery. It will be eligible for the Eggers, the Anthonys, and also, believe it or not, it will be eligible for Best First Mystery at Malice Domestic, because it's my first mystery novel. I have published in other genres. So it really depends sometimes on the particular contest, and the venue or the convention as to what they define would be best first novel. So I'm actually eligible for that next year. So keeping my fingers crossed, because I guess the more awards you get, the more leverage, that maybe a future book coming down, you could get a better book deal. So let's hope.
So what I know of your writing, as far as the fiction writing goes, you have 4 published books?
No, 5.
5.
5. I have 3 in science fiction fantasy. I have 1, which is the New York Give Me Your Best or Your Worst, which is a photo illustrated anthology that not only did I get a New York Foundation of the Arts grant to publish, but also I got a Chanticleer Grand Prize Award for collected short stories after it was published. So I've got the 3 science fiction fantasies, the photo illustrated anthology, which is like a coffee table book with short stories in it. And then I have the Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles.
Okay, so that was part of my question, was because you said you had 6 Chanticleer, and I was like, oh wait, but I wasn't counting the anthology
Right.
for some reason. I wasn't thinking about that.
I
So,
also have 3 unpublished books in a different Hollywood mystery series. It takes place in the 90s. It has a different protagonist, and 2 of those have won awards.
wow.
So, but they're not published yet. And the reason why they're kind of on the shelf right now, the reason why is not my current agent, but my previous agent was not very good. And I knocked him off and she never sent him out.
Oh, well, that's
So
unfortunate.
I
Yeah.
was stuck, stuck trying to find another agent and also trying to pitch him myself. But at that point, I needed a 3-book deal. And it's very difficult to try to get a 3-book deal on your own.
Mm.
So I actually turned down about 7 small presses because I would get like an answer to a query letter and they say, oh, we love book number 3. Yeah, but I shelled out of pocket for freelance editors to help clean these up.
Mhm.
And and it's the same protagonist, throughout. So I need the 3-book deal.
Mhm.
So I do, and believe it or not, one of those, actually half of it takes place in Atlanta.
Oh, really? Of the one
Yes.
that's not published yet?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, we are now cheering for you to get to move those forward at some point, because we love a Atlanta backdrop for mysteries, which is Sisters in Crime Atlanta, the Atlanta chapter. So we
Sure.
love that. So I typically start out my conversations with the authors asking them to tell us about themselves, their early life, their childhood, where you grew up, where you went to school, what you studied, and those sort of things. And but I jumped ahead just because I wanted to clarify. So let's go back in time and get back on our normal conversation schedule. And will you tell us about your early life and upbringing?
I grew up in Cincinnati. And it was, a typical suburban kid, I guess. Some issues with the family, which I won't get into.
Don't
But
worry.
my whole life kind of was turned upside down when my parents decided to move out of my hometown. And I knew at the age of 13, I was going to move to New York and I was going to go to one of the top art and design schools. And my parents kind of, when I was finished 10th grade, I went to a unusual high school that was 7 through 12, wasn't broken up with like middle school and high school. And it was an excellent high school. I loved it. And they kind of yanked everybody. My grandparents, both my grandparents on my father's side passed away. And they decided, instead of moving into their house, which, I hoped was going to happen, my dad decided to build a house in Florida. And I had the 2 worst years of my life
Yeah.
while I was there. And my parents broke up within 6 months of the whole situation. So I could not wait to get out of there. And I finally flew the coop at the age of 18 and went to design school in New York, but with very little support from my family. They were still fighting over a nasty divorce. So a lot of it was on my own. And I probably should have moved to Los Angeles at that point, but I didn't. And because I was afraid it was going to be like Florida.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a hot weather type of person. And I, kind of went from there. I bounced around. I lived in LA for a while. I actually lived a few years in Atlanta. I lived in Los Angeles for a while. I lived in Japan for a while. So I did a lot of different things and got into some really bad relationships, unfortunately. So, but I remember it was back around 1982. I really wanted to start writing, and I started writing the first draft of my science fiction fantasy series. And I actually used the same title, but I didn't know anything about the craft of writing, didn't go to a single workshop. We're talking about an electric typewriter. So this is before people even had word processing that we could, correct our stuff. I mean, we had whiteout. I hated that stuff. I always got it all over my hands and my clothes. So, and I was a terrible typist, absolutely terrible. And I still am not great, but thank God for computers and everything else. But I, started writing this thing, and it ended up being, I think, like 1,200 pages. And then all sorts of things happened in my life, between moving around a lot and finding the love of my life who left me with our child, and having to be a single mom and raising a kid. So this manuscript wound up in a box in the back of a closet for years. And when I finally moved out to Los Angeles, I had originally hoped to break in as a screenwriter, which was my background, but I also had a background in cinematography and photography from film school. And there was no way raising a child by myself that I could live off of spec scripts. So I ended up breaking into the film business as a still photographer, because that could bring in a paycheck at the end of the week. It was still freelance from production to production, but I could do headshots. I could do a lot of things that would actually bring in cash. So that's what I concentrated on. But with all the hours I had to put into it, I didn't have time to do the writing on the side. There was just absolutely no way. I mean, when you're in film production, easily you could have a 12 to 14 hour day, and sometimes 6 days a week if it's non-union. So between those hours and raising a child by myself, I just couldn't do it. And this was before laptops. So it wasn't like you could even sneak a laptop on the set and try to do, I had no downtime, but again, it wasn't even an option. So I was just so burned out. If I had 5 minutes, I closed my eyes and meditate just to kind of refresh. So it was a tough gig, but I knew one of those days that I would return to it. And eventually I did. But I also realized, and that's when I started taking writing workshops for a first-time writer, nobody is going to buy a $1,200 page script. So I decided, let's kind of break this up into a series and rewrite it. So I started working on rewriting it, and that's how Silent Meridian, which was the first of the alternate history series, was born.
So one of the things that I am realizing you have in common with your two current series is that they both involve history. They take us back in time. So what is your fascination and your background in history?
I don't know why I'm drawn to the history, frankly, but I am. I've always been interested in Hollywood history for sure. So, in fact, that was one of my favorite set of classes in film school was the history of film. But other than that, I didn't even start that series right away. I started the Time Traveler Professor series. And of course, if you're dealing with time travel, you're dealing with history.
Mhm.
And I had to learn stuff as I was going along. In fact, many times I actually had to rewrite stuff because I had it wrong. I grew up in Ohio, and to me, a farm house was away from the road. You know, we're talking like Ohio cornfields here. You
Mhm.
know, away from the road. Probably a barn was red, maybe wood, and not so in Belgium on the Western Front. And I actually ended up for the Pocketful of Lodestones, which is book 2 in the Time Traveler Professor series. It starts in August 1914 when World War I breaks out. And my protagonist decides to sign up. He can't find a job. He was teaching music in Germany and can't go back because he's Scottish. So he signs up for the Royal Scots and gets sent to the Western Front. And I completely described the Western Front wrong. And thank God it wasn't published yet. But I decided, you know what? I'm kind of one of those method actor people. You know, if it's possible to actually physically go to the location and smell the flowers and see everything and just kind of feel it firsthand, that's what I like to do. So I ended up, it was crazy. I orchestrated it all myself. I stayed at various Airbnbs or bed and breakfasts, and I ended up hiring a tour guide who took me to both the Belgian and French Western Front areas. And we discussed it, and all of a sudden, he took me over to his friend's farmhouse. It was smack on the road. I was like, huh? This is the farmhouse? And we discussed this one particular chapter that I wrote. And he said, oh, no, you can't have a 300-year-old family farmhouse made out of wood. And because I was describing it because the Germans had bombed it. And the Allies were going to check it out, see if there were any survivors. And if not, they were going to pillage it for food, you know, maybe take a cow or something because the troops were desperate. So he said, oh no, you'd never have one out of wood because of the fact they're below sea level. It would rot. He said it would be stone or it would be brick. And I said, interesting. So I had to rewrite a lot of stuff to make it realistic. And I actually took photos. In fact, one of my photos is used on the cover. It was a restored trench that I actually got to go with on a tour group, and I managed to get a really nice photo with nobody in it. So I managed to get it clear, and it was used in the background of the cover on that one. But yeah, no, I've had to rewrite passages and also learn stuff. In I think it was book 2. I had to learn about the first emperor of China, the emperor who did the terracotta warriors. And I didn't know a thing about that. So it's like, okay, you know, at least my library has a really good online system where you could actually order the books and they will deliver it to your branch library. So I use that instead of like buying tons of books that I'll use once and probably never use again. But I had to learn all sorts of stuff. So it's an amazing amount of research that you have to get into.
So tell us the premise of the Time Traveler Professor and where it came from. Like, what was your spark? What was the inspiration for
That
it?
was a strange thing because it wasn't that way in the original 1,200-page manuscript. Trust me, it's gone through a lot of metamorphosis since then. I used to have an antiques and vintage clothing business, and I would come across really strange objects. And I came across some letters from somebody, and they were just fantastic. I mean, they were, but fantastic in a fantasy sense, not fantastic in a great sense. And I'm thinking there is absolutely no proof of any of what this guy is saying, but he claimed that he knew Conan Doyle, and they had tried some psychic experiments or something together. And as I started picking up some biographies of Conan Doyle and realized he was into this stuff. I had no idea. I, like the average person who thought, oh, Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
That's all he's written.
Right.
And also The Lost World, because that was kind of popular, and they've done like some TV shows and different spin-offs on it. But other than that, to me, Conan Doyle was Sherlock Holmes. And I had no idea that he was into this stuff. So I started reading it, and I said, this is really interesting. And I just kind of played with it. And I said, well, there's absolutely no way I'm going to try to prove any of this stuff, but certainly makes great fiction. And I was reading a lot of science fiction fantasy at the time, and I just kind of went with it and started playing with it, and then looking up some stuff on the guy who wrote a few original oddball letters, and just kind of took off. So that's how I started with it. But I added Harry Houdini, who actually was a friend of Doyle's. They were best of friends, and then they became worst of enemies. So I added Harry Houdini into the mix. And I also added H.G. Wells, because I figured, what, I need kind of an antagonist to Conan Doyle. And I decided, I always loved time travel books, and time travel movies. And I decided, what, we're gonna have my protagonist, who is highly fictionalized, invent an actual time machine that works. And he's gonna experiment with Doyle with this thing, and Doyle wants to share it with H.G. Wells, but H.G. Wells doesn't believe a word of it. So he's the doubting, person, saying, oh, come on, it's only fiction. There is no time machine that works. And at the end of book 2, Wells, little bit of a spoiler, Wells steals Doyle's time machine. So in book 3, they end up going back in time together. And book 3 is a lot of fun. It is kind of a mashup between The Lost World and The Island of Dr. Moreau. So I take 2 books that they hadn't written yet, and they go back to this world that's kind of like a mashup of the books that they're going to end up writing a few years off into the future. And it's a really, really fun, really crazy book.
It sounds awesome. I mean, the whole series is fascinating to me. And I love the story behind how it came to be, because to me, it's very unique. And sometimes I feel like what's being written out there has been written, and we're just telling it in a different way sometimes. But this really, like, I thought, wow, I have not come across anything like this. So hearing that story of how you were sparked by it is really interesting. Did you, like, where are those letters now? Did you sell them?
No, I've got them.
Yeah.
But nobody gets to see them. But I do have this one letter. It really is crazy, though, that Conan Doyle wrote to somebody, and I don't know who the guy is. But obviously I have it because it's in Doyle's handwriting and it's got his signature, which is fabulous. But they're discussing some paranormal phenomenon about some guy, and somebody claimed he saw his ghost, but the guy isn't dead. So I suspect they were talking about like astral projection or something along those lines. And Doyle was really into that. I mean, he actually was a member of the Society of Psychical Research in London. He was also a member, and I joke about it, in the first book in the time travel series. He was a member of something called the Ghost Club. But he was like an original Victorian Ghostbuster. I mean, if somebody gave him a lead about some kind of weird haunting or paranormal phenomena, he was there. So, but a lot of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, like, stay away, it's like, that's, and what's so funny about it is it's totally the opposite of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes does not believe in paranormal phenomenon, and he is like Mr. Spock. He is logical. So, and it's so funny because the creator of Sherlock Holmes believed in all sorts of crazy stuff. So go figure. That's why I felt that Conan Doyle was just so fascinating, because he was just like, really, went on a broad spectrum.
Yeah, very, very diverse. And you certainly have me, more curious to learn more about him. So let's talk about, you've started a new series, and it's set in glamorous old Hollywood, which I think just sounds fascinating. And so again, another segue into history and historic locations as well as people. So kind of the same thing you did in the Time Traveler Professor series. So let's talk about the new series, and then we're gonna bring them both together again. But first, let's talk about the new book.
Well, it takes place in 1940. And I actually, my protagonist is based on my best friend. And I had a friend who I was taking care of. Unfortunately, she passed away about 6.5 years ago at the age of 93. So she had a nice long life. And she was an actress in the 40s. And she would tell me all sorts of stories. And she wanted me to write her memoirs. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this is tough. I've talked to a lot of agents. I've been to a lot of writing seminars. Memoirs are some of the hardest things to sell. And unless you're famous or infamous, you could be a political disgrace figure, you'll get a memoir, right? Or you'll, if you're a famous rock star or a famous movie star, you'll probably get and have an interesting story, you'll probably get a memoir. Hillary Clinton got like, I think, a 7-figure advance for her memoir, right? But she's Hillary Clinton, I mean, my friend didn't have that kind of star power. So I was trying to figure out, like, how am I going to market you? And then all of a sudden, one day, the light bulb went off. And I said, I figured it out. And she said, what? And I said, well, every time you go to the library, what kind of book do you check out? Mystery. She said, yeah, you're right. And I said, and you watch a lot of television. I said, what's on the television? It's either Turner Classic Movies, it's Animal Planet or Nat Geo Wild, or it's NCIS, Law and Order, or Murder, She Wrote. So I said, I am going to make you a fictional character, and you will be a disgruntled actress in the 1940s, but you're going to be a female PI, and you're going to have a male sidekick. How does that sound? She's something like that, right? So we made it legal. I got a hold of her estate attorney, and we put everything in writing that I had the rights to her life story. And I told her, fortunately or unfortunately, I was launching my very first book, the Silent Meridian, the time travel book at the time. So I said, once I'm a little settled in with that, because right now all my concentration is on that, I will start this series at some point. And unfortunately, she did pass away before I did start the series, but she is my inspiration for Babs Norman, who is my protagonist. Her sidekick is totally fictitious. He is kind of a composite of a lot of male friends that she had during that period of time, but there's no resemblance to anybody that I know of. And I figured, okay, who is going to be her first big celebrity client? And I'm thinking, well, I've been writing about Conan Doyle in my other series. I kind of know a lot about Sherlock Holmes. And who was Sherlock Holmes in Hollywood in 1940? Basil Rathbone. So I figured, okay, let's, pick up a biography or two of Basil Rathbone and start reading about him. And one of the first things that I noticed, he was a major animal lover and always had at least 5 dogs. So I figured, could you imagine somebody like Basil Rathbone going into the LAPD or the city pound saying, I lost my dog? They'd laugh at him. Like Sherlock Holmes lost his dog. Yeah, right. Go find him yourself. You're the world's greatest consultative detective. We've got bigger crime to go after. So I figured, oh, this poor guy, nobody wants to take him seriously. Everybody looks at him as Sherlock Holmes. So he goes around to various vets' offices and puts up flyers. And it happens to be that Babs Norman and Guy Brandt, who was her partner, have rescued a box of flea-bitten kittens. And next thing you know, they recognize him because they used to both be actors. And they start a conversation and he is ready to hire them sight unseen. And they're kind of like, we're not really dog catchers or pet detectives or anything like that. But Babs notices that he's got a variety magazine and there's a full page ad that MGM puts out. Asta from the Thin Man movie is also missing. And this is where I needed to, a huge reward, of course, where I needed to branch out because there wasn't enough with Basil being famous, but his dog, nobody knew who his dog was, right? But what if a celebrity dog got, kidnapped, dog-napped? So I figured I literally turned on, it was just a fluke. I turned on TCM that afternoon. The Thin Man was on. I watched, I said, Asta. We have to do Asta. And we will pull in Nick and Nora Charles. We'll get William Powell, Myrna Loy. They will also be in on this caper to be able to find the missing dogs. So that's where the whole thing came together for the first book, is when I started out with Basil, but I just felt there wasn't enough meat on the bone. And then when I saw, it was just, again, Kismet, the right movie was on at the right time on TCM, and I figured, okay, Asta. So that's where I came up with that one. And I wanted it's like a screwball comedy from the 1940s, but there is a very serious, sinister element behind the dog nappings. And what was really bizarre about it is I was being interviewed on a podcast a few months ago, and I get news feeds from LA Magazine, and there were dog napping in LA is a huge thing now. And apparently Lady Gaga had 2 of her French bulldogs dog napped, and they actually shot her dog walker. I mean, the person didn't die, but still, it was like a major, major thing. And I started getting all these articles and news feeds about serious dog napping issues in LA right now. So I had already written the book. It was actually already out and launched, published But all of a sudden I was ready to say, wow, this is like touching on a really current social issue.
Yeah. Kismet, serendipity, I don't know, because wow, that's you know what you did for fun, as you mentioned, is now like something that's like real life. And I'm a dog owner, and I would be devastated, so
Yeah.
it's something that people are very emotionally attached to their pets. And
Oh,
so
sure.
yeah, so but let's talk about the fact that in both of these series, you have real life people, that
Yes.
so legitimate, not fictitious people, and you bring them into your stories. And what there's a responsibility with that, right?
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so tell us about what you as a writer go through. You touched a little bit on like the research that you did where you went overseas, but what about looking into these individuals to create homage to them, legitimate homage to them in your
Well,
fictitious story?
absolutely. Read a lot of biographies and also try to find as many documentaries on the people as possible. So
Mhm.
it's not, obviously, I watched tons of films with these people in them,
Mhm.
including films for William Powell and Myrna Loy outside of The Thin Man. Oh my God, somebody wrote down, it's like, I'm working on a book about dog napping in Buckhead. So, but basically, uh, a lot of times off screen, the actors act a little differently. They speak a little bit differently. Basil Rathbone has done a lot of period pieces. So you want to make sure you don't have him talking like Sir Guy of Gisborne from Robin Hood. And, when he's, sitting in a restaurant in Los Angeles in 1940. So it's, it's an amazing amount of, research that you have to go through, and you just feel like you've got their dialogue in their head as if they're in their own living room,
Mm.
being right across from you. So as I said, I did an enormous amount of research. And the one thing you have to keep in mind, though, is you've got to keep it. I'm very, very picky with dates. So if there's absolutely no way in the world that Basil Rathbone could have been in Los Angeles in 1940 and he was overseas, then I wouldn't have been able to, do it, because people would say, "Oh, I read this, he wasn't in town, it doesn't make any sense." But the one thing you do have to be very careful with is some of these people don't have the best reputations. Now, with Basil, he's got a pretty good reputation. Same thing with William Powell and Myrna Loy. But one person that I did mention briefly was Errol Flynn. And if you read any of the biographical material on him, he had some issues. He drank a lot. Was with women a lot. He liked young girls. He got arrested. He was in a major legal trial a little bit later on. I think it was in 1943, which wouldn't have affected my book. But you could put that stuff in there as long as it's already documented. So what you don't want is a situation where you get like Errol Flynn killed somebody and murdered him in cold blood.
Yeah.
That you can't do. So you do have to be careful when it comes to using somebody real. You're allowed to use something that's historically documented, but you don't want anything that you could be sued for libel or anything like that. So you do have to be careful.
Yeah, and I think too, the challenge, is really what you already touched on. You said there is a persona on screen that you have quick and easy access to, especially these days. You can
Sure.
just decide you want to watch something online and find it, versus trying to catch it on Turner Classic Movies like you did. But you know, finding the truth in who they were when they weren't on screen. So that's the challenge, yeah, for that. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why you need to look for documentaries. You need to read biographies and autobiographies, and also make sure you're reading the correct ones. Because occasionally you'll get some biographies out there that really are not that factual.
Right.
So,
Or a different perspective. Like there could be someone who loved this person and they're only writing about the positive things, and yet there's this something over here that somebody else revealed. You know, sometimes you do see that dueling, you know, biography
yes.
out
Yes.
there. So
Yeah. I always distrust when somebody's son or daughter
yes,
writes about somebody, because they're going to highlight only the good parts, or at
Well,
least most of the good parts.
yeah, unless you're Christina Crawford.
Right.
And you know what? And isn't there controversy over whether or not she's being truthful and how bad her mother was?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, you know, so you know, it is, but it sounds like you really have a handle on how to go about this. And especially, you're not new to the business, but in your first time writing and bringing in these historical characters, the seriousness that it sounds like you took to do this correctly out of the gate, when so many people are like, oh, I've got this idea and I'm just going to run with it and go crazy with it and do what I want. And then they have the epiphany afterwards. You knew right away that you had to be very methodical about this and how you were telling your story.
I am definitely a plotter.
You're a plotter.
I'm a plotter. I probably had several hundred pages of notes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
On that one. And I just finished the sequel and turned it into my publisher. And wow, all the notes. It's got a bigger cast of characters on that one.
Great.
So yeah, I had so many notes, it was ridiculous.
So it's good to know that there's a sequel.
Yes.
And was this like a 3-book deal?
Yes.
So there'll be
Yes.
a third one.
There will be.
And when you're writing, one thing that I'm always fascinated by, and by the way, I am not a writer, I'm a reader, but
Okay.
a lot of my friends, as a matter of fact, I'm looking at who has joined us this morning, and most of them are writers. When they talk about the fact, especially Kathy Nichols, and she talks about the fact that she already, as she's publishing one book, she's already halfway through her next book. And I'm thinking, wow, how do you do that? So it sounds like you are the same, because you've just turned in your sequel. And so I'm guessing the third, you already have an idea for what you're going to do for the third?
The third book is kind of nebulous at this point. I know the title. I know what it's going to be about. I have not started outlining it yet. But as I was working on book 2, many times I would create file cards and said, for book 3, so I was collecting material basically, but I still have to outline the story structure. That part, what I do, and this is kind of how I worked with this particular Hollywood, Golden Age of Hollywood Mystery series, is I go through a cram period where I'm in between projects, and it's like, okay, catch up on some books, catch up on some movies, and I get to a saturation point and say, okay, now start outlining. So since I just literally finished in the last 2 weeks the sequel, I'm in the cram period right now, where I'm in between. And what I did is I took a break. I'm reading a friend's book, which is wonderful, by the way, which has absolutely nothing to do with 1940s golden age of mystery. It's a contemporary, it's wonderful, but it does have, it is a mystery thriller with humor. So that part we have in common. Other than that, I'm just using it to kind of cleanse the palate. I also read a Sherlock Holmes pastiche that takes place in World War I, and that again was to cleanse the palate. And I'll probably catch up on some movies, and then if I wake up in the middle of the night and say, I could do this, and then write it down on my file card. And then at some point soon, it'll come together and I'll start outlining. But I did just write a short story, which again was a total diversion. So I'll switch gears in between projects, but I'll always be open for ideas that come in for other things.
So one of the things that I know, but we haven't really talked about is that as a writer, you use a pen name.
Yes.
And so you're also really establishing yourself as Elizabeth Crowens.
Yes.
Do you have any like regrets, like, hey, I'm going down in history right now as Elizabeth Crowens as opposed to your non-pen name? Is there any reservations about that?
No. The only thing is when I tell people in the movie industry that I've worked on a lot of films and television shows, I do tell them that it will not be listed under Elizabeth Crowens, because the only way that I could get my Elizabeth Crowens listed on the Internet Movie Database, IMDb, is if I actually produced or wrote a screenplay and used Elizabeth Crowens as the pen name. So all my entertainment credits are listed under my legal name. So.
And speaking of the possibility of writing a screenplay, it really, to me, this the golden age of Hollywood mysteries, that kind of sounds like something that we could potentially see in film. Like I can see that as a really fun series on, I watch a lot of Hallmark murder and mystery television. I can so see what you were describing as a movie. Is that any thought? I mean, especially with you being in the industry, was there any thought about that?
I'm hoping somebody will option it. I think it would be great as a Netflix or Amazon Prime series.
Oh,
So
there you go.
the only issue is it does cost more to do a period piece.
Because of
So
the settings and
the setting, the costumes, the cars,
yeah.
it costs more to produce. Certainly with Hallmark, I know they tend to do modern day. It's a lot cheaper. So
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, here's hoping. And, believe it or not, we really just scratched the surface of who you are in your writing. And we are on it. We're coming up on the end of the hour, which is surprising. It always goes by so fast, and you are so fascinating to talk with. And I really appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with us. I'd love to open it up to the floor. If anybody has any questions for Elizabeth before we sign off, please feel free to speak up. You do not have to mute. You feel free to unmute, or you can raise your hand, or you can type it in the chat like Kathy did when she said she's working on a book with dog napping in Buckhead. But if nobody has anything, I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes. And I would love to know, like, will you walk us through a day in the life of Elizabeth Crowens? Like, what do you do?
I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning.
No.
Yes. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and from 4 to about 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I write. And one of the reasons right now, I've been a little lax this week because, again, I literally just finished book 2, and I did just finish a short story that I'm hoping to submit to an anthology. But other than that, I need the quiet. I need the phone not ringing. I live in New York City. I hear garbage trucks. I hear jackhammers. It is not quiet in New York during working hours, Monday through Friday. So, but from 4 to 8, it is.
Yeah.
8, it gets a little, I could start hearing the delivery trucks start going down the street, but it is quiet. I am not hearing anything from a neighbor. I'm not hearing a dog bark. I'm not hearing a baby cry in my building. It's great. And I can concentrate on, that's my creative hour. After 8 o'clock, I kind of switch to the left brain. And that's when I start checking the email, doing the post on Facebook, worrying about what doctor's appointment I have coming up or have to make. So, but once I'm in that left brain mode, it's really hard for me to switch back to the creative mode. It's kind of nice to kind of, do you ever get, well, you said you're more of a reader than a writer, but a lot of times I find that I get really great ideas when my brain is not just kind of slightly distracted, you know, a little foggy. I get great ideas in the shower and taking a bath, believe it or not. And I actually, you're going to laugh. I used to work on Baywatch years ago, and I had an underwater writing slate. So I actually dug it up and I put it in my bathroom just in case, because tried it. I mean, you know, you have a notepad and you're dripping wet, you know, you can't write it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or even with a pencil, it doesn't work. And then, you know, your paper falls apart and everything else. But these underwater writing slates are erasable, and you could use a pencil, and they're great. And I keep one by the bathtub, and I can't tell you, so many times I'll come up with like, oh, this is how I finished the chapter. So, and when I'm kind of half asleep and a little groggy at 4 a.m. and I'm still working on my first cup of coffee, that's when my brain is a little more, it's right brained. It's a little more open to that kind of thing. So I find that's my creative zone. So that's how my day starts. And then around 8 o'clock, well, I do try to lay down, because at that point, if I've been going for close to, 3.5, 4 hours in the middle of the night, I'm tired. I need a break. I'll try to lie down for maybe anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Then I'll get up and I'll start doing the social media and looking at the email. And then at one point, though, during the day, I got to take a nap. I got to lay down for at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And in the evening, and I go to bed early because I wake up early. In the evening, that's usually reading time for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a little too burned out to go back to writing, but I'm still trying to wind down, for the rest of the evening. So that's when I read either fiction or nonfiction and do my research if I need to read nonfiction biographies or something from my current project, or I will watch a movie. But usually it's more like reading than movies. But that's my time to kind of catch up on that, is before going to sleep, and then I set the alarm, wake up at 4,
and do it all again.
Yep.
So Lauren has a great question, and she wants to know if you could talk more about revising when your research reveals changes, and how do you decide starting over versus editing?
Well, I'm a big proponent of track changes. So, and I had an issue because I bounce back and forth between New York and Los Angeles. And a lot of my research for when I'm writing for the golden age of Hollywood is in Los Angeles. I could do a certain amount in New York, but not everything. And a lot of times I was trying to set up a scene where it was going to be in a very famous nightclub in 1940, and I wanted a particular celebrity to be able to walk in, and it was going to like cause chaos to everybody who was in the club. And I needed to find out, was it plausible? Because this person was in and out of jail. It's like, could this person actually have walked into the restaurant in September 1941? You know, where was this person then? So I kind of put placeholders in that area saying contingent, and then little notes to myself and track changes, contingent upon these dates, this might have to be revised. So, and that's how I ended up working. And it's amazing, the research librarians love to help you. So you could go to either a public library or a private library, because they go to both. I spent a lot of time at the LA Public Library, and I also spent a lot of time at the Margaret Herrick, which is a private library owned by the Motion Picture Academy. And these people are really, really helpful. I mean, they really do want to help writers get it right. And they know what kind of material that they've got that might be able to help you out. So, you know, a lot of times, as I said, I'll put little placeholders in there knowing that some details of the chapter might have to get changed because I don't quite have all the information that I need. I hope that answered the question. Yeah.
Lauren, did that answer your question?
She's muted.
She said
thanks.
thanks.
Okay, she said thanks. Okay, great.
You know, she's normally not shy. She normally will talk very easily. So as I mentioned, we have come to the end of our hour. I'm so surprised that it really did go by so quickly. But you are fascinating, and I knew there was going to be a lot of content for us to get through. And I have so enjoyed this, and I thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. I am definitely looking forward to the entirety of the Hollywood series. I'm Golden Age of Hollywood. I don't want to miscommunicate that. And also what the other series you mentioned that is like waiting for its moment, which is more of a, you know, modern time and has some Atlanta elements.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I do have a series that I have written. The only reason why it's not published, as I said, I had a bad agent who never sent it out. And next thing you know, I needed a 3-book deal. So that's why I kind of put it on the shelf and started this other series. But the first book in the other series, about half of it takes place in Atlanta. So
well, definitely excited. Can't wait for that series to get off the shelf when you do bring it about. So let's sign off with you telling us how we can find you and keep up with you so that we know when your books are coming out and what's happening in your very fascinating life.
Sure. Well, you can always order my book through Amazon, obviously Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, and even the time travel books too. They're still in print. The New York book will be going out of print in September. So it is a photo illustrated anthology. It's very unusual. It's based on my caption contest. And there is an ebook version, but both will be, this was the publishing agreement that I had with my contributors, that it would only be good for 3 years, and it will be expiring at the end of September. So it will be going out of print. The sequel to Hounds, the Hollywood Baskervilles, will be coming out in March, beginning of March 2025, hopefully in time for Left Coast Crime. So I'll have the 2 books in that particular series available. And there is a very strong hint at the end of Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles as to who it is going to be involved. And I will say, I'll give you a little bit of hint. In the title of the book is called Bye Bye Blackbird. Okay.
Okay.
There is a movie that was really filmed and released in 1941 about a very famous black bird, and it happens to star Humphrey Bogart. So
Oh, cool.
that is what the book 2 is about.
Awesome.
So the 3rd book I'll keep secret, but there is a hint at the end of book 2 about that one too. So but I do have famous movies and famous actors in all of them, and it's a lot of fun. And they're funny. They're funny. I mean, there's serious crimes going on, and yet you'll laugh out loud during these things. So hopefully everybody will enjoy them. Well, and get your local indie bookstores to stock them, please, please. It's always tough when you're working with a small press, because you can only do so much and still write your next book, and you can only depend on your publisher to do so much too. So
yeah, for sure. So I thank you so much again for joining us. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to keeping up with you and reading your books. Great job. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, and friend me on Facebook. I have this daily caption contest, and in the evening, that's in the morning. In the evening, I have something called Wrong Answers Only. And I usually take a film still, a still from either a famous movie or an obscure movie. And I have all sorts of authors, readers, librarians making the funniest comments to these pictures. So it's a lot of fun, and it's very engaging. So definitely, suggest that you send me a friend request, and also maybe a private message like, I saw you. I watched your Zoom meeting on Off the Shelf. So, then I'll know you're not like spoofing me or whatever. So I do get those, crazy, friend requests from doctors with nobody in common. So
yeah, I have a general in my friend request right now. I'm like, yeah, no, don't. Yeah. Sorry. Right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful Saturday wherever you are. And Lance, do you want to take us out?
Okay. Thank you, Dawn. And thank you, Elizabeth Crowens. And good luck with your Golden Age of Hollywood Mystery series.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed your presentation and information and entertainment. So just to be sure you don't miss it, coming up on next Saturday, the 6th, will be, not next Saturday, but the 6th, whatever that is. It'll be Reader Rendezvous. It's on Zoom. It's where mystery readers gather to talk about what they're reading and why they like it. And then coming up the following week, on the 13th, we'll be back at the Decatur Library with Kim Connery, talking about her latest book and how to write secondary characters. So we really enjoyed everyone being here. Thank you for spending the hour with us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Angel.